Welcome to Grid Talk. My name is Tom Downey, and today we are here to preview the 2026 Canadian Grand Prix. Joining me, we have my co-host, Mr. Tom Horrox.
Hello.
Hello, sir, and Mr. George Howson.
Morning.
Good morning, sir. Right, let's get straight into it. So, we are back in Canada, the streets-ish of Montreal, and there is only one team which is the talk of the town, if you would like, at the moment. That is, of course, Mercedes. So, Tom, I'll come to you first. It does look like a Mercedes driver is certainly going to win the championship this year. It's Russell versus Antonelli, it's fair to say, for the win in Canada. It is also a sprint weekend. What are your thoughts on Mercedes this weekend? Do you think they will continue this streak they're on? Do you think anybody can sort of break that duck? Or do you think we're just going to see yet another Silver Arrows victory?
I'd say it's difficult to say, really. I mean, I know Mercedes have got a lot of new upgrades coming, but we've seen recently, and certainly the last few years, that their upgrades have not always delivered the way they expect to. You know, they expected various different things from different iterations of car, and it's not always come to the fore. Yes, they've absolutely nailed this regulation set with the best power unit, obviously, and then a good car integration with that power unit. But I think there's other teams that I'm sure we'll talk about a bit later on that I think are not going to be far away, and I don't think they are going to finish the season with the quickest car. So it's going to end up, you know, who is the benchmark, and are they going to pull out a big enough lead that they're going to be able to hold on towards the end of the season? So I would say that Russell, for me, is still slightly the favourite for the championship, but Antonelli has definitely given himself a shot. So for Russell versus Antonelli, I think this is an absolutely key weekend because Antonelli absolutely routed Russell in the last Grand Prix. Now, you could say the previous few Grand Prix to that, there were circumstances. Obviously, Russell won in Australia and Antonelli did not have a great race. But China and Japan, it was Antonelli may have won the races, but there were arguments to say that Russell, you know, probably could have won those races or probably should have won those races. I still think that Antonelli would have won in China anyway. But that, you know, that aside, I think that he's definitely given himself a shot. But I think for me, Russell is the key. You know, if he has a bad weekend this weekend, you can say that Miami is just a bad circuit for Russell, but it's not that bad. It's not that bad a circuit for him. So if he is resoundingly beaten by Antonelli again, I think then the narrative does switch to Antonelli being the title favourite. I'm not saying he's going to win the championship, I'm not even going to say he's definitely going to finish above Russell, but given the points gap and the trajectory, he would then be in that position. But there's very similar circumstances to what we saw last year as well. So it's a very similar situation in that, you know, the more experienced incumbent has, you know, doing a great job with a great car, but then the youngster, not quite a rookie, but the youngster comes in and starts doing a better job and it rattles them. So it's how George bounces back from that. I think that Mercedes probably will just about have the edge this weekend, but there are other teams bringing quite a lot. So let's wait and see. But yeah, it depends on how good their upgrades pan out to be. But I think it's probably going to be Russell is going to have the edge because he is very good in Canada as well. And Antonelli did not have the best of weekends. He got a podium last year, but he didn't have the best of weekends overall and was, again, massively overshadowed by Russell, like he was at most races. But I think that Russell is going to be the lead driver at the end of the weekend, certainly over the 3 days. I think it's going to be Russell who's going to be out there, but not saying he's definitely going to win the championship.
It's absolutely far too early in the season to be talking about who's going to win the championship. Look at what happened last year. You know, we definitely started to put our eggs, or certainly I started to put my eggs in one basket. That person ended up finishing third in the championship. So yeah, it can go down to the wire, as we've seen many a time before, you know, including last year. So George, the same question to you. Do you think Mercedes will sort of continue this dominant streak into Canada? And by extension, who do you think is going to win out of the Russell and Antonelli over the weekend?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, Antonelli's won 3 in a row, which is absolutely incredible. I don't think anybody would have really seen that coming. Obviously, last year, Canada was a bit of an oddity in terms of the results. It was I think one of the very few races, only 2 races that Max Verstappen or a McLaren didn't win the Grand Prix in. I think Russell winning in Singapore was something like that. So it was a really, really oddball of a result. McLaren were relatively nowhere when they were absolutely dominant at that part of the season. I mean, Russell was saying, "Oh, I don't like the Miami track. I'm not very good around here." But still, you're in the best car on the grid, and a champion can't really, a prospective champion cannot make these kinds of excuses. You know, Antonelli has just been relatively quietly going about his business. I mean, even when he had a poor sprint race by his standards, he picked himself up and won the Grand Prix. So this does have echoes of what we saw last season, where, you know, Oscar Piastri was not miles clear, but relatively consistently beating Lando Norris in most Grand Prix. But the main challenge really for Antonelli is keeping this going throughout an entire season. You know, we've got over 20 races this season, maybe potentially a wild Saudi Arabian Grand Prix towards the end of the season. I'm not ruling that out potentially being a thing. You know, we spoke about that before here. But, you know, we've got a lot of races still to go. And Kimi Antonelli, just like Oscar Piastri, he's going to have setbacks. There's going to be mistakes. Some are going to be his fault. Some of them are going to be other people's fault. And it's all about how he picks himself up from that. And we've not seen him have to really come back from that. And that's going to be the test, because he's never had to do that before. He's never been in a championship battle before. But the same is true for Russell, although, of course, Russell is more experienced in general in F1. So, you know, the fact that Russell won here last year, the fact that he really needs to get a win this weekend, I would say that Russell should be the favourite here. But, and we'll talk about him a little bit more, I'm sure, but McLaren have shown that they have really got on top of their car. You know, Oscar Piastri in particular, after an absolutely awful start to the season, not his fault, of course, the car literally not starting in the first two Grand Prix, he's picked himself up too. So I don't think Mercedes are particularly dominant right now. They're only really ahead because they had such a good three Grand Prix. In Miami, it was, you know, take a name out of a hat really for who was going to win. So it could well be the same in Canada this weekend as well.
That's a very fair point, actually, especially about Miami there, George. You know, there were definitely a couple of drivers in contention for the win. It did seem, certainly from my perspective, it did seem a bit of a sort of foregone conclusion after a while that Kimi was going to win, or certainly Mercedes was going to win. But I do think the pack is closing up this year. Right. George, you mentioned about McLaren, so that is a very good point, and that is indeed our next talking point. Tom, we have seen McLaren after a very difficult start to the season, including that double DNS in China. We have seen them actually show some pretty good pace. Obviously, Oscar, his first race of the season where he was actually able to start the race, third time's the charm. In Japan, he was on the podium. Lando, of course, won the sprint after putting it on pole for the sprint in Miami. I was going to say Canada. Hopefully that's foreshadowing. McLaren actually looks strong enough, I would say, to perhaps sort of challenge somewhat. Do you think McLaren is that team now that could really take the fight to Mercedes? Because we've seen Ferrari sort of try, and yes, they get very good race starts, but Ferrari, they just tend to implode and then just chew up their tyres faster than Augustus Gloop in the chocolate factory. So there's a reference for you. So, you know, so do you think McLaren could win at all this weekend? Obviously, like I said, we saw them win the sprint in Miami a couple of weeks ago. Do you think they could start to sneak into the sort of top two regularly?
So this has got some amazing parallels for me to 2023 in that they started a little bit on the back foot after lots of promise towards the end of 2022. And then they brought in an upgrade for Austria where it was just on the one car and it looked pretty decent. And then they brought the double upgrade for Silverstone and they were both right up there. I think Verstappen took pole in the end, but it was second and third and they were looking really, really strong. So I think similar with this one, they've got half an upgrade they brought in for the last race, and they're bringing the rest of the bits for this weekend. And Mercedes bringing an entire package in one go. I think that McLaren have really got an opportunity here. They haven't put an upgrade on the car for at least 2 years since their new wind tunnels come online. They haven't put an upgrade on the car that has not just worked, and often it's worked better than they expected, which is slightly worrying. You kind of want it to work exactly as you expect, because then you understand why it's happening. But they've got this really great history at the moment where everything they're doing, they just, whatever they throw at the car, it sticks, and it's great. And that hasn't happened with the other teams. Now they seem to have got on now with the power distribution, the energy management, which they were definitely behind at the start of the season. A couple of grumbles towards Mercedes saying, well, you didn't tell us anything. And well, we didn't know. We just figured it out. Yeah, okay. So I genuinely think they've done a huge amount of good here. They're bringing more upgrades. You look at Ferrari, and Ferrari's pace has never really been on the same level as the Mercedes. It's been energy management and pass and repass, coupled with good starts, and they've not really pushed on from that. it was a really good start from an excitement point of view, but it wasn't really. It was never really that they were challenging the Mercedes team. Mercedes were always clearly in front, and the big upgrade hasn't really worked. Or certainly based on Miami, it hasn't really worked. It's a big test for them this weekend. They need to bring stuff that works, or need to understand their package and make it work. Or I think McLaren are going to be the team that are chasing. Now they're about 90 odd points behind Mercedes in the constructors championship, which, let's be honest, Max Verstappen alone was nearly 90 points behind at one point last year, Piastri, and then he ended up overhauling Piastri. So, and that's just one car. So it's far from over. There's a long way to go. There's a lot of points on the table, but if they are going to challenge Mercedes, they do need to now be able to race them week in, week out. They need to at least be equal on level peggings with Mercedes and develop at the same rate as them. If they can do that, then all they need to do is win more races than Mercedes, get the rub of the green and get slightly more races, slightly more wins. And then what they'll find is they'll start to weaken. And then I'm sure Mercedes will get a bit of bad luck. At the moment, they've won every race, so I'm sure they'll get a bit of bad luck at some point. And then all of a sudden, they haul in 40 points in one weekend, and then that's it. They're right with them. So I think there's definitely a chance. And I think that from what we've seen from McLaren, from what we know is coming from McLaren, they had a very aggressive strategy at the start of the season, which I was really interested to find out about. They said that their launch spec is their launch spec. That's what they're starting the season with. Then they're going to see where everything goes after testing in the first race, and then bring the developments based on that, which means they've got more headroom for developments towards the end of the season. So they could find themselves going into these crucial races at the end of the season, and they can bring a couple more upgrades, whereas Mercedes and other teams may have topped out on their development budget by then. So there's definitely some opportunities there, and I'm looking forward to finding out what happens.
Yeah, again, very, very good points. Like I mentioned earlier, and you just alluded to as well, we saw that points deficit get overhauled by McLaren a lot. We saw that points deficit by Max on the McLarens get overhauled, I should say. Words. Can you tell I just rolled that out of bed? So, yeah, there are definitely. I certainly think McLaren can sort of claw it back. They do have the disadvantage of 2 race weekends where they didn't really score any points aside from the sprint in China. I can't remember when Lando finished in Australia. I think he was somewhere in the lower points. But the point is, no pun intended, that Mercedes have 2 Grand Prix weekends, head start advantage, whatever you want to call it, over McLaren. George, the same question to you. Of course, as we just talked about, and as Tom just mentioned, we have seen McLaren definitely back towards the top. They're beginning to get on top of the reliability issues, etc. Do you think they can really start to break into this sort of top 2 and become the established, certainly second best team on the grid this year?
Certainly, yeah, certainly. I mean, I think they're already there, to be honest with you, in terms of the pace. I mean, they were fantastic in Japan. Piastri could have won that on another day had the safety car not been called out when it was. That Mercedes seems to have a big problem when it comes to being in traffic, as Russell has found out over the last few Grand Prix. It seems fantastic in clean air, but when it comes to overtaking, less so. It doesn't seem really as strong in that area as probably like the Red Bull, the Ferrari, and the McLaren. They clearly and rightfully, to an extent, designed that car around it being 1 and 2 in clear air. Because when Antonelli in particular has been in clean air, he's been off like a rocket ship. He's built like 15, 20-second gaps. But overtaking, even in an era where we have these regulations changing around where it is easier than ever probably to overtake, but equally not the easiest to keep that as well because of the pass and repass. It does seem as though the Mercedes does struggle a little bit in that regard. So I think if McLaren can get out front, they can stay out front. And Lando Norris showed that during the sprint in Miami. And of course, this is another sprint weekend as well in Canada. There's no reason why he can't do the same thing again. It seems easy to forget that Lando Norris is the defending champion, because the McLaren, especially at the start, was miles off. But right now, I mean, like Tom says, it just works. Every single upgrade they seem to go for works. Their strategy works so well. And they've shown that even as a a team of Mercedes, they can beat Mercedes regularly. And they've done that for the last few years. And who knows? They might do it again this year if they can continue this momentum. I mean, if Ferrari perform like they performed in Miami, in Montreal this weekend, and McLaren do the same thing, then McLaren are going to be second in the championship. They've closed that gap down massively. it is a big ask for them to beat Mercedes, over the course of a season, but we've only done what? Less than a quarter of the Grand Prix this year. There is a long, long way to go. And the development race, as we see in Formula One, particularly at the start of a new regulation cycle like this, that's the real race. The race on track is obviously where you get the points, but the development race in the factories, that is where the real wins and losses are. And obviously, what's after Canada as well? Monaco, if they qualify on the front row, if they get pole position, I don't see. I think it's a matter of when, really, rather than if that McLaren gets some Grand Prix victories this year. Mercedes are not going to have a clean sweep in terms of Grand Prix victories, so I'm really excited to see how this all evolves, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I don't think they'll get a clean sweep of victories. I think F1 has evolved to a point where that just isn't going to happen. I think if Mercedes were going to have it, they would have had it in 2020. I know that was, I think that's actually before I knew you all, but I wondered if they were going to win every race that year, and we had a plethora of race winners that year. Look at 2016. Yes, Mercedes did win almost all of them, but they didn't win all of them because, they drove into each other, and then also, I think it was Malaysia. Danny Rick took a win that year. So, no team is perfect by any stretch, and I think McLaren and arguably Ferrari are far too close for Mercedes to be looking at a clean sweep. Obviously, there are sprint wins in there as well, but that's a different discussion for a different day, whether those count or not. And we're talking about Grand Prix victories here, because those are the ones that truly matter. So, yeah, Mercedes very much looking like a 5-star team. But if you think this show deserves a 5-star review, please do leave us 5 stars wherever you listen to your shows. Get your F1 content, etc. Blah blah blah. Yeah, feedback, good. Listen, like, subscribe. Yeah, there's the mid-read done. That's staying in as well. I'm not really doing that. So moving on to the other two talking points. One of the topics that has indeed dominated F1 recently has been the talk of everybody's favorite thing, super clipping. So we saw it in Australia where drivers were heading down the straight towards turn 10 and they were losing upwards of 30 to 40 kilometers an hour. And we saw it again in China, drivers, cars running out of energy quite a lot as they were heading down towards the back straight, down towards turn 1. You can hear it in the revs to the point where F1 appeared, I'm just saying appeared, don't come after me FIA, not that I care, appeared to be doctoring the footage, including making the on-screen displays change the speed that the driver was going at to try and disguise how much cars were losing when they were going into super clipping. We saw a change coming into Miami where they changed the rate at which super clipping happens and about how aggressive it is. We're not going to go into the technical details of it, but basically the cars were not as aggressive in their regen. So, Tom, we saw, thank you very much for that, we saw, obviously there's a very, very long straight at the back of Miami. Certainly when I was watching it and indeed listening to it, it appeared to be less obvious, the super clipping. I think that's fair to say. Do you think this change is for the good? Do you think it perhaps needs to be adjusted further? Because there are still questions around it. It is still a bit of a sore point, a bit of a touchy subject in F1 at the minute. I'm still very much sort of open-minded with it, but do you think this changes for the better? Do you think they need to change it more with the super clipping and the energy regen? Or do you think it's good enough? Do you think it's good as it is? What are your thoughts on it?
Not my Formula One. I'm never watching it again. The amount of people moaning about it is so annoying. Yeah, no, it's fine. Like, I like what they've changed. Like, the trouble is you'll have unintended consequences. What they've inadvertently created, they'll claim they knew this would happen, but what they've inadvertently created with this regulation set is a different type of racing, which can be quite exciting, and I quite like it. But if they go back too much, we will just end up in a situation where we will have cars that have very similar performance profiles that can't overtake. So it's very difficult. They need to find a happy medium. Now, I do agree that on some circuits, that super clipping is going to be quite jarring, and it wasn't a great look in Australia particularly. Miami is a very energy rich circuit, so it's not an amazing place to test it. There's a lot of heavy braking zones, slow corners where you can harvest quite aggressively. Monaco will be insane. Monaco, I'm really looking forward to. It's going to be great because they are going to have so much energy. They're going to be able to harvest so much that they're just going to have so much deployment. We're going to see some great lap times in Monaco, and dare I say it, we might even see some overtaking. It's possible we might see some overtaking in Monaco with this regulation set, maybe. Although it might just be that everyone's got so much energy that everyone uses it at the same points and no one can overtake anyway. So that's possibly a solution as well. So either way, like I think we don't need to have massive overreactions and change everything, throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think there's definitely some small things that need to do to get us through this season to make it a little less jarring on those energy starved circuits. And then next year, look at a few changes, 2028, a few more wholesale changes, because the ball's already rolling for 2027. There's already development that's happened. I believe that they had an agreement because of the huge wholesale changes for the 2026 regulations that they were going to carry over the chassis to 2027 to then save on costs and be able to, they'll be able to still hit the budget cap. That's all fine. So their choices are either raise the budget cap or make new chassis, because the changes that they're looking at making for next year with this would involve new chassis, because they would need to either make the battery larger, the fuel tanks larger to increase the fuel flow, and that kind of stuff. You ain't going to fit that in the existing chassis. So, and we've got to be careful, because the other thing that they've done with this rule set is they've made the cars that little bit smaller, narrower, shorter, and they just look so much better on track. Like, I think last year's power unit with this year's regulation set, if that were possible, not sure if dimension wise it would work, but would be a great Formula One to watch. Just need a little bit less aerodynamics, and all of a sudden, the racing's better again. Like, the energy part of it is just an annoying kind of subplot that they just need to get on top of a little bit better. They were just a little bit too aggressive with what they wanted to try and achieve, and now they're just rolling back on that. That's positive. I'm glad that they are rolling back a little bit and trying to change a few things to make it better and not have so much aggressive loss in power, because that is not a great look. It is just still another element. It's the same for everyone, and everyone can adapt differently, and those who get on top of it quicker are the better driver. But it certainly isn't, for me, one of these situations where they've changed something fundamentally that is just horrific and it's the death of Formula One. It's not. It's great. The viewing figures are up, the attendances are up, and there's some stuff that people just aren't going to understand, and that's fine. Like, so long as it's presented in a way that everyone enjoys the racing, that's fine. If you want to learn more about the technical side, then you can do. So yeah, in answer to your question, I'm glad they're doing something, but I don't think they need to go too horrendous. Yes, definitely make big changes, not huge changes, but bigger changes for the end of the year and potentially into 28 as well, to just try and make it a little bit simpler.
Yeah, we are seeing a lot of sort of excuse me, vitriol online of people saying, bring back maintain, bring back refueling, bring back all this, all these sort of adenoid crowds. There's a clip for you, George. And I'll be real, that's not the answer, because as you said, Tom, we'll just go back to the issues we had before, and people love to look back with rose-tinted sort of glasses, rose-tinted spectacles, however you want to phrase it. And going back and reintroducing things that have been removed from the sport for a reason is not the solution. Yes, a lot of us, me included, would love to hear the scream of those naturally aspirated V8s or V10s back. However, the sport has moved on. The world has evolved. And I say this as someone who daily drives a V8 car on the road with a set of racing pipes at the time you've heard how loud my car is. So, it's F1 has evolved as a sport. Now, on the flip side, we'll get people who will be saying things like, oh, but it applies to like road cars and all the rest of it. The only road car really that has the sort of quote unquote hybrid tech that's been in F1 is the Mercedes AMG 1. And those cost a couple of million quid each, and they keep catching fire. So maybe it's best that we don't put F1 tech in road cars, sort of like through and through. Yeah, it is sort of certainly one of those, I would say. But George, again, same question to you. This whole sort of like super clipping thing, what are your thoughts on it? Obviously, like Tom mentioned, and like I said, we saw the change in Miami, but Miami's quite an energy rich circuit, like Tom said. I still don't know which circuit's energy rich and which ones aren't. I don't know. I mean, good luck, I guess. But yeah, what are your thoughts on the sort of change to the energy management and all the rest of it?
I think it's a good move, and I think it seems like it works. I mean, Tom's right. It's not maybe the best circuit to try and push the extremes of it. Obviously, the worst that we've seen so far of it was at Suzuka. Very high speed, a lot of big corners, big speed corners, not that many huge braking zones. So we're not really going to see a circuit like that until probably Silverstone or Spa later in the season. So if we go to those tracks and we don't see any harem-scaring moments or, God forbid, any really big accidents, or as well when it comes to this too, all of the different, all the lifting off and everything like that with the super clipping, as long as we don't see something like that around those, I think it's been a success. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it is different. It is different, but this is F1 fans. F1 fans love to complain. They love to beg for change. Like, give us change. We want things to change. F1's terrible. And they change it, and they're just like, not like that. That's not what we wanted. And it's like, you're never happy. You're never happy. Honestly, it genuinely drives me up the wall. And I think a lot of these fans that are complaining have not been with the sport for that long, or they're very much stuck in their ways about things. I mean, I've seen people complain. Like when I first started watching F1, I always tell this now because I've got to that sort of age where I've been watching F1 for like 20 years. Where like I remember back in the day when I first started watching it, everybody was complaining, F1's terrible, F1's dying, can't pass, it's terrible. It's not as good as the V12s back in the day. Bring back turbochargers. And then they brought back turbochargers. Like, turbochargers are terrible. This is the worst Formula One has ever been. That was happening in 2014. Now in the year of our Lord 2026, they bring new engines out. And guess what? Nobody likes them. At least some people don't anyway. Honestly, you're gonna laugh or you're gonna cry at something like this. For me, it's brand new tech. It is groundbreaking. It is not perfect. Something had to be done after Japan because it was a safety issue. I think the changes they've made are good. They're a step in the right direction. It's not perfect, but then again, compare it to what it was like in 2014 when we first had these new engines in. Mercedes were just miles ahead of everybody. There was no competition. And already after four races, in the fifth race, we're going into Canada thinking, who's going to win? We don't know because it's pretty close. And I think to have that at the start of a new regulations change, actually, regardless of any super clipping, I think that's the most important thing. We want competitiveness. We want people to be able to challenge for the victory and it not just being one driver or one team. So overall, yeah, it's not perfect. They're going to continue to work on it. And I think the changes they're making for 2027, again, that's a step in the right direction as well, to be honest. So I can't believe I'm saying this, but good on F1. Ignore the haters. Keep doing what you're doing.
Dab on the haters, am I right, George? So
The
yeah,
worst of the haters.
I know. Yeah, F the haters, all the rest of it. But joking aside, you did make very good points there, as you always do, of course. But just make sure I get my brownie points in. But yeah, it's for F1. They do appear to be listening and they are taking feedback on board. And it's one thing, obviously, the fans saying it, and F1 does seem to have a very sort of vocal fan base. And I have seen things online, I think on Instagram, where someone has set up a website sort of like starting petitions saying, I speak for all F1 fans when I say, bring back refueling, bring back V10s, bring back tyre wars, bring back all this. What, so you want to go back to watching races when in pit stops? Nah, all right, you can keep that one. I prefer it when they race on track. And F1 has always been a car and driver event. If you want to watch close wheel-to-wheel battling all the time, sling your hook and watch the Spec Series, because that's where you'll find it. I've got the 24 Hours of Nürburgring on at the minute. That is, you are seeing a lot more sort of wheel-to-wheel there. But people are very much really gatekeeping it, and this is where we're seeing a bit of the sort of whole, I've been watching since the 1930s with my granddad on the black and white TV, and then you've got the other sort of like Drive to Survive, sort of like quote-unquote sort of fanboys, and then it's like, can we not just all enjoy the sport, please? We have different teams, we have different preferences, different people will enjoy different things of the sport. It's a complex sport. Let's make people feel welcome, because having more eyes on the sport is only a good thing. So you old folk, shut up. You new folk, shut up. Everybody, enjoy it and shut up. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. But yeah, the last point on... Oh, God, it feels good to be back. But after having said all of that, we do have a very strong rumour, ironically, that F1 is certainly looking to bring back the V8. And Mohammed Ben Quiff, or whatever he's called, Mohammed Ben sort of like Grey Streak, or I don't know. You can tell we're not sponsored by the FIA. He's apparently very vocal about this, and don't forget he's very vocal in bringing Cadillac back because he's got imposter syndrome, and he always wants to be the main character everywhere, even though he looks like a sodding NPC. He's apparently very vocal in bringing back V8s into the sport. Now, we don't know if this is going to be natural aspirated V8s, if it's going to be turbo V8s. I would imagine turbo V8s, because turbocharging is sort of like how things are going, sadly. So I would imagine it would be twin turbo V8s or certainly turbo V8s. Tom, we have started with you. Sorry, George. That's because Tom's ahead of you on my screen. So yeah, deal with it. And yeah, do you think a return to V8s with a sort of simplified hybrid system would be a good way for F1 to go? Because that's the rumor on the grapevine at the moment.
So from what I understand, it's more than just a rumor. It's actually widespread agreement throughout all the teams and the FIA that this is the way they're going to go. It's just the finer details of exactly how that's going to happen and what the splits are going to be. So there's two things that F1 can do here with this. I think what's going to happen is they are going to go back to V8s, but it's just a case of when and how. So what they would have to do is they can either wait until 2031, do whatever they want, and then whoever signs up signs up. That's fine. The better way to do it is to try and get all of the manufacturers on board with what they're doing so that everyone's happy. It does mean that you will have to make a few compromises, but just don't do what they did last time where they banned front axle regen just because they were worried that Audi were going to be better than everyone else. No, you still need to be in control of it, but definitely make a few compromises to fit in with what people want. Now, what I think we will probably end up with is a naturally aspirated V8 with basically a super KERS. If you think back to what we had in sort of 2010 onwards, where we had probably about 5% KERS battery was on it. I think we're probably going to be more like pushing towards 20 to 30%. So you're going to have a very powerful KERS system, which is going to be driver controlled with a naturally aspirated V8 with sustainable fuels. I think that's the way we're going to end up going, because that for me kind of ticks the sustainability box. It ticks the hybridization box. It takes away all of this algorithmic racing where the car learns what you're doing. It puts everything back in the eyes of the driver. If it's a naturally aspirated V8, you can make the cars small again. Obviously, they're not going to go back to the same size they were back in sort of 2005 to 2010, where they had these super light small vehicles that would just bounce around the corners, because the crash structures are so much safer now. You've got the halo to factor in. There's so much more that has to go into these cars now to make them safe. So we're never ever going to go back to those dimensions of cars. Sorry, people, that's not going to happen. But we can certainly go towards that. We can certainly get maybe sort of 50% towards that, certainly lighter than what we've got now. If we're losing the turbo, if we're losing a lot of the battery, the size of the battery, and the motors will get smaller as well, I think we can get a long way towards that. And that, for me, would be the most sensible solution for Formula One. But I'm just going to temper people's expectations here. If we do go back to a V8, they ain't going to sound like the V8s that we had back in sort of 2013. They're not going to sound like that, because the reason they were so loud was because they were wasting energy. Noise is waste. You're going to have much more efficient engines now. So yes, they will be louder than the V6s, but they're still not going to be what they were in 2012, 13, that kind of era. They're still going to be quieter. So just temper your expectations. Don't expect it to be like a return to when you're standing at Silverstone on the back of the hangar straight and a V10 screens past you and you can literally hear your eardrums vibrating and bursting. I stupidly didn't wear earplugs that year. That was a bad idea. But yeah, we're not going back to that, because also obviously for health reasons as well, and noise pollution. It's just not what people want, especially in cities as well. With F1 doing more and more street tracks, so we will go back to something close to that. But that, for me, that's what I would like to see, and I think that's what Formula One will go, something similar to that in the end.
Very good points there, Tom. And like you said, it's wasted energy. It's not efficient, and F1 has moved into a more sort of efficient era, if you like, hence the turbos, the recharging, all the rest of it. It's not going to be your high revving, sort of high scream revving V8s, V10s that are going to sort of 15,000 RPM, with that sort of glorious wail. It's not going to be that anymore, and cars just don't sound like that anymore. Road cars don't really sound like that anymore, aside from sort of very, very sort of expensive, ultra limited sort of custom things. Most performance cars these days, if you look at the sort of Audi VAG group, it's a twin turbo V8. Mercedes have a twin turbo V8. McLaren V8s, V6s. That is the way that things are going. So it's not going to be like the cars evolved. And again, Tom, you made a very, very good point where you said that the crash structures have evolved. The cars are bigger and heavier for a reason, because they have more safety stuff around the drivers. So yes, it will be good to see it back. It'd be interesting to hear what it's like. I mean, it might just sound like an RS6 meter Bradford at the end of the day. I guess we'll find out whether they're all doing pops and bangs down the back street. So let's find out, and let's see what it's going to be. George, obviously this is this last talking point before we get into some predictions. Same question to you, my friend. Do you think this is good for the sport to go back to V8s? What are your thoughts on it? Obviously, like we said, it's probably not going to be what it was before, but do you think it's the right step? Do you think it's the right idea from F1? What are your thoughts?
I think it's something, if you do it in the right way, it's a good idea. I mean, F1's moving towards net zero for 2030. This will be a year after that. They obviously feel like even with having, presumably bigger engines, the fact that they're V8s, they'll be, larger and stuff like that. So they obviously feel confident in being able to, still maintain that environmental aspect to it. I mean, it's something that not every F1 fan really cares about, but obviously it's their image that they're projecting to the world. So if they feel confident in being able to do that and still are able to do that, then I think it's a good idea. I mean, I've always thought that, you could potentially get V10s back one day, like has been spoke about over the past few years, but you'd have to do it with renewable, sustainable fuels. And yes, it wouldn't sound quite the same as it did back in the day, but it'd still sound a lot better than what we have now. I would say that's the thing with F1 right now. And it's such a large part, such a primal part of the product, as it were, to use their own terminology. The sound. The sound, it's so important. Yeah, the F1 cars look like F1 cars. Yeah, they've got Macarena, flippy, flappy kind of wings and stuff like that, whether you love it, whether you loathe it, it's something that's quite striking that you don't see every day, obviously. But the sound is something that even non-F1 fans, even non-petrol heads, that's something that you pick up on. And the sound, ever since he switched to V6, is not the same. It's different in person. In person, they are loud. I've always said it, if you go to an F1 Grand Prix in person, which 99% of F1 fans have not done, but if you do that and you come away saying, oh, those cars were quite quiet, go and get your hearing tested. But they are not quiet. They are just not as loud as they used to be. And on telly, for the most part, they don't sound great. They don't. They've tried, but there's only so much you can do. You can't polish a certain object. I'm not going to repeat here on this video, for lack of a better term, but they can replace it, they can improve it. So I think that'd be a big thing. You'd have a better sound. And if they can do it in an environmentally friendly way, like they're always trying to push, then great. But it's come from our Lord and Savior, Mohammed Ben Sulayem. He said these very popularity contest-like things in the past and not delivered on some of them. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if in the end, in a couple of years' time, they say, no, we can't do it, the technology's not there. And then he blames the team for not being ambitious enough and believing in him and his vision or something like that, because he's just trying to get re-elected as the president. That's what he does.
What, you mean the president of the FIA has been lying to us? No way.
No, not an elected official. They are honourable and right. 100%.
Yeah.
Especially
And
our own here in the UK.
Yeah, exactly. And he doesn't pay himself or anything, so so he's not corrupt at all. So yeah. Right, before we get sort of like taken out by his sort of like authorities and black SUVs, let's talk about some predictions. So it is indeed a sprint weekend, so Tom, come to you first because I like your name. We'll start off with if you give me your pole position, your podium, your bold prediction, and your sprint winner.
Okay, so I started off the season doing this because I thought it was going to happen, but it never happened. So I stopped doing it, but now I think it's going to happen. So basically, stop dancing around the houses. I'm going to go pole position, Max Verstappen, because he is just that damn good, and he can drag a car close to pole most weekends, so no matter how bad it is. And I think the step that Red Bull made at the last Grand Prix, they are going to be back in the hunt for pole positions, and he will maximise, he will get 99.99% out of that Red Bull and will take pole position. I think for the same reasons that he's going to win the sprint. So he's going to be my sprint winner, back on the top step of the podium. The Grand Prix is going to be a different matter altogether. And I'm manifesting here. I am going to go for a Lando Norris win. I'm going bold. And the reason I'm going bold is because I believe that the extra upgrades coming in from McLaren are going to put them at least on a level pegging with Mercedes, and potentially there may be a little bit of bad blood between the Mercedes drivers, leading to not necessarily a collision, but maybe a little bit of looking at each other and forgetting about the McLarens. So I'm going to go with Lando Norris win. Consequently, George Russell will be second, and then Max Verstappen will round out the podium. Bold position for me is going to be, you know how much I love them, love to talk about them, especially love the nationality, I'm going to go for Pierre Gasly and Alpine P5 or better. I think Alpine they've simplified things. They've got a decent engine and they are on the up. I'm going to say Pierre Gasly is going to be better than the rest, so he's going to get a P5 or better, maybe even sneak a podium, but I'm not putting that in my prediction.
Right, we heard that. We heard that here. Tom saying Alpine podium. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. I mean, yeah. George, same question to you.
Yeah, we'll get on to my bold prediction, but I think Tom's actually is more likely than mine, but we'll get there eventually. So sprint victory. I'm tempted to go for Antonelli because he is quite good in the sprints, but I'm gonna go for my boys McLaren. I'm gonna go for my boys McLaren to make it back-to-back sprint victories, and I'm gonna go for Oscar Piastri on a bit of a redemption arc, obviously getting taken out by Lando Norris in the Grand Prix here 12 months ago. So I'm gonna go for Piastri to get the sprint victory. Pole overall. I mean, it won't surprise me if Mercedes start on pole and don't get the best start. Their starts is their Achilles heel so far this season. But I'm going to go for him to get pole. And I know George Russell won here 12 months ago, but Anthony got a podium as well. He was good here. He was really good here 12 months ago. So I'm going to go with Antonelli to get the pole position. In terms of the podium for the Grand Prix, yeah, I'll give it to Antonelli. I'll make it 4 in a row. I just got a feeling this kid's on fire right now. He really is. And I honestly think that Russell's going to struggle relatively, but I am going to give him a podium. I'm going to give him P3. P2, I'm going to go with my boy Lando. I'm going to go Lando. Bit of a spread there between everybody. McLarens and Mercedes, all involved in the top threes of everything. And the bold prediction, Aston Martin to score a point. Yeah, the McLaren is rising there for the video viewers. I got my Lego one back there as well. I'm gonna go for Aston Martin to get a point. Imagine if it's Lance Stroll. Lance Strolovic in his home race gets the first point of the new Aston Martin Honda era in Formula One. It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. I'm saying it anyway.
I mean, Arsenal will be lucky if they finish the race. You know, that'll be progress for them, sadly.
Absolutely.
But then again, it's Stroll, so who cares? As for me, my pole position, I'm going to say... I think George Russell, I think he'll be back on pole. He was on pole last year. I think he was on pole in 2022. I'm fairly sure he's had more than one pole position. I may have to go and double check that. But he's been pretty good around here because there was one year where he and Max did exactly the same time down to point, the sort of like 3 decimal points. So I can't remember what year that was though. So yeah, I'm going to go Russell for pole. I don't think we're going to see a 2016-esque tete-a-tete between the two Mercs. I think the team just won't allow it. It's as simple as my podium. I'm going to say Kimi's going to win. I'm going to say Piastri second and Russell third. My bold prediction, I'm going to say one of the Cadillacs finishes either the sprint or the main race in 15th or higher. I know that sounds slightly odd, but 22 cars on the grid. We're not getting as many DNFs now. I think we can see it. They've been slowly improving. I'm not saying which one. Just one of them. Doesn't matter who. Just one of them, please. So, yeah. And then my sprint went Lando. I think he's going to win the sprint. As much as I want Max to win, ever since he's taken that number 3, he's just been cursed. So yeah, including the 25s at the Nürburgring. So yeah, I don't think it'll be him, sadly. Right, thank you very much for joining me. Tom, you're obviously a co-host here, but you also do other bits and bobs. Do you want to give a big shout-out to things? Maybe Monkey Seat, Grid Talk Slutty Cousin?
Yeah, I mean, we occasionally podcast on the Monkey Seat. We've just done one race for you so far this year for the Australian Grand Prix, and we've not been able to do anything since. So, yeah, look out for the Monkey Seat in your podcast player of choice. Occasionally, we do release the podcast.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. And George, you do all sorts. So just if you just give a shout out to whatever you want to give a shout out to, mate.
Yeah, I do all sorts. That's very, very true. We're just keeping it on the F1 stuff. Formula Reports, you can find us on Substack. Plenty of written articles on there, plenty of videos going out there. The largest F1 community on Substack in the world. I always flex that whenever I get the chance. We're also available on YouTube, on Facebook, most of the social medias with the apps, just like Grid Talk is as well. And we're also over on MSN as well as F1 Chronicles. So yeah, plenty of F1 content. There'll be plenty of preview stuff as well for Canada, including going over the best Canadian Grand Prix drivers of all time. But does Lance Stroll make the list? There's not many to choose from, admittedly, so not a lot of a competition there.
And the answer's still no. For me, please do Follow our socials. We're at Grid Talk UK on all the major platforms. Check out our Predictions League. So the only thing that's left to say is thanks for listening, and don't forget to hit subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, and write a review. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please do check out our previous shows as well. A big thank you to Jared Bradley and Holly Eagle for supporting us on Patreon. If you want to support the show further, why not sign up to our Patreon for exclusive content? Please make sure you subscribe so you're the first to know when new content is released. We will be back soon with plenty more F1 content. Until then, thank you very much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast, and goodbye.